Hey, what's up guys? So today I wanted to do a video about this lens in particular, but also about filling a niche for a type of lens that you may be wanting to get. Now I've had multiple of the Nikon, let's say 70 to 300 type lenses, kind of the basic slow zoom lenses that you can get available for that type of focal range. So I wanted to present this lens here as an alternative for those of you looking for a faster lens in that zoom range. Now I wanted to point out that you're going to often be looking to use quicker shutter speeds because of the longer focal length on lenses like this. And so you're limited to how much light you can actually get into the lens. So quite often, that's the main draw to getting something like an f2.8 version of a lens like this, because it allows you to be able to shoot in more situations, albeit you'll usually have to shoot wider apertures. Now I'm going to offer this Vivitar Series 1 70 to 210 millimeter lens as an alternative to some of the expensive f2.8 lenses that many of you wish that you could get but probably can't afford, much like myself. And this lens in particular, it's an older lens that was built for film. So it is a full frame lens, and it's actually much better whenever used on a full frame, although it's still quite useful on a crop sensor camera as well. It is a fairly old school heavier lens, and the other main thing is that it is a push-pull zoom, so it's a lot different to use than some of the modern lenses, and so it does take a little bit of getting used to. Now this lens is particularly heavy, but really to me that's its only downfall. And these lenses are cool because they can often be acquired for less than $100, for example. And so I really suggest for a lot of you guys, if you already have like a 70 to 300 Nikon type lens or something like that, to consider picking up something like this in addition to it, just to play around with and see if it's something that you really want to use. And once you figure out that it can be very helpful, you might decide that you would like to invest in a true, f2.8, for example, lens that would cost you a whole lot more. Now, the main problem that I have with this lens is that it is fairly, large and heavy and that sort of thing. And I'm generally a landscape and travel type photographer. So sometimes I leave this at home, opting instead for like a VR version of a 70 to 300, for example, and losing the extra stop or two of light that way. Now that said, I do have some photo examples I wanted to show you with this lens, and I will mention that generally, because it is such a longer lens, I'm often only switching to this lens because of the extra length, which compresses the background and foreground, and that changes the effect of the photo. So often I'm going to be shooting it at wider apertures, so I don't have too many examples where there's enough light to shoot it at let's say f8 or anything f11. So most of the examples I have here are going to be shot more wide open. And so I'm just going to go through a couple of these. One really cool thing about this lens is that it is a decent macro lens, and it can get in pretty well. The only issue is that on longer exposures you could have a situation where the push-pull zoom becomes an issue if you're shooting let's say down onto something like a flower, for example. So it is better shot more of a horizontal orientation in order to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now, however, I've found it to be a very good macro lens, and so I do have some photo examples of using it that way. And macro is one area where I tend to, stop it down just a little bit more. So you're going to see some examples here where, I might use f 5.6 or, something like that. Now, for example, here you can see an example where I shot it at f/22 to get as much depth of field as possible. And so it will happen sometimes when you're on a tripod and you can actually extend the shutter length to make up for that. Another example at f/4, and quite often you'll find that these are shot, more wide open, especially if you're trying to hand hold or anything like that. This is a good lens for general purpose photography, like doing landscapes or anything like that, because it does compress the foreground into the background, making it look more like a two-dimensional field of view kind of situation. Look that up if you aren't sure about lens compression. But it does make some cool photos that way, and so you can actually get some neat stuff. So I do find it to be a good lens for not only macro and general purpose photography, but I also find it very good for portraiture, where typically a more shallow depth of field is totally acceptable or even desired. Now, I did want to point out that this lens is an older multi-coated lens, so you're not going to get the same type of flare reduction and things that you would on a more modern lens, which to me can add a sort of appeal to it, often sort of washing out a photo, for example, and giving you that more bleached look, which can be also quite interesting to add to your portfolio, especially if you're more used to shooting something more like low-key images or something like that. So it can definitely bring that extra variety. So again, I would highly suggest for those of you who either don't really have the money for a true f/2.8 type lens to consider getting one of these things and playing around with it and seeing if that's something that you want to invest in. You may find that this lens is absolutely capable enough as it is, and I do find it to be very adequate myself. I'm sure there are some extra advantages to getting a true expensive f/2.8 style lens or something, but as far as I'm concerned, this is a very good alternative at a very, very cheap price. There may be other makes and brands that can do something similar to this. However, I just haven't run across it. These lenses were very well regarded. I do have another video about the I believe it's a 28-90 lens. You can actually watch that here. Now, I wanted to point out that there are like 5 generations of this lens available, and you do want to do a little research to see which one you're looking at and to decide which one you want to get. Mine's one of the more well-regarded generations. That's the generation 3 made by Comine. And as far as I can tell, each generation is made by a different manufacturer for Vivitar and still branded as the Series 1 lens. So definitely do a little bit of research into that if you're not sure which one you're looking at. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoy this review. If you get any questions about the lens, feel free to ask in the comments below, and I'll see if I can get a good answer for you. Take care, guys.